live, right? What's up? See, hey guys, welcome another amazing episode. Real Talk with Giuseppe. I have two really interesting peeps over here. They have no idea what we're going to be talking about, and you know that. That's why you keep following us. You keep watching these videos because every time we surprise you, they're going to introduce themselves today.
Yeah, Pete Williams with Farmers Insurance.
Awesome.
And I'm Ian Campbell with Davey Tree Experts.
So we're talking about trees, tree trimmings, all kind of trees, right? Yeah. And then we're talking about insurance, fire insurance. You know, we're trying to connect regards to what happened over there in Northern California. It actually is something that's vivid over here too. It happened a few years ago, if you guys remember, that half of San Diego burned down a few years back. So I'm excited about talking to you both because it's a real deal. And as a matter of fact, you guys weren't listening before, but when we got here, I said, look, let's talk about real facts, things that happened to you, you know, in your experience and your experience as well, so we can really deliver amazing content to people watching out there. Claire, sounds good?
Sounds
yeah?
awesome.
We got real as it could be, huh?
Yeah. Keep
Cool.
It real.
Let's do it.
Real talk.
All right, so let's start with you first. How long have you been in the business?
Going on 11 years.
Oh, wow. So you're a guru of the insurance policies here.
Guru, yes.
That's awesome. So you do a little bit of everything, right? Like,
We do home, we do auto, we do life, umbrella policies,
Okay.
commercial. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Boats, motorcycles.
so a lot of people out there are wondering, what's an umbrella policy?
Umbrella is additional liability coverage. It's over your home, over your cars, over your motorcycles, and it really protects you from those catastrophic events that can really make you bankrupt.
So if you had, let's say, an umbrella policy and all this crap happening and your house burns down or half of the house and your car blows up and your motorcycle melts, what happens if you have an umbrella policy?
Umbrella only covers liability. So if you injure somebody else, that's when the umbrella kicks in.
Got you.
But you're talking, you would use each policy individually.
Got
So
it.
your
Okay.
motorcycle would replace your motorcycle, car would, car policy would replace the car,
Got it.
homeowner's policy would rebuild the house.
So the umbrella policy, basically, it's good if you hit somebody or something happened. That's
you
it, but you
injure,
get hurt.
yeah, if you injure somebody else and you've got attorneys against you and you've got a lawsuit against you, that's when you really need that umbrella policy.
Which I don't think it happens often that they sue you here, huh, in California.
Never.
I haven't heard of
I
it.
think people wake up in the morning and thinking about who I'm going to sue this morning.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know, understand how they can roll like that. So, umbrella policy, and is it something you recommend to consumers?
Anytime somebody owns a home, we highly recommend it. Even when they don't own a home, you don't need to be a millionaire to be sued like one. So when somebody does own a home,
It's true.
It's going to be at least 500, 600,000. They need to have an umbrella to protect that because really their auto policy is only going to cover them for about $500,000. That's the most you can get. You need more than that overall.
Gotcha. Okay, so umbrella policy, great tip out there.
It's most important.
Awesome. I'm going to circle back up to you and we'll talk about fire insurance and whatnot. I want to talk to you about, all starts with fire and some bushes, right?
Yep.
With maybe a cigarette butt, and then the devil comes up. So what do you do to protect and help people to keep their backyards clean? I know you're looking at me like, I didn't expect that question, but I mean...
Right. Well, first off, I've been doing this for 16 years.
Right.
Right. So, one of the biggest things to do is to mitigate any kind of obvious hazards. So if there's dead branches, dead trees, dead grass, start with the basics. Get rid of the basic fire hazards on the property. And then it goes on from there. You can look at planting fire-resistant plants, and there's a lot of different varieties of it. But it all starts with mitigate the immediate hazard. Clear your house. Make sure you have a 10-foot barrier from your house of all vegetation.
So 10 foot.
10 feet.
So your recommendation is that you have no brushes, nothing like that?
Well, and it's not
dead
just
bushes?
my recommendation. So my organization works a lot with the fire abatements that are issued by the San Diego Fire Marshal down here. And the minimum requirement is 10 feet from all structures.
Okay.
The other thing is all vegetation should be cleared to a minimum height of 10 feet off the ground or 7 feet off the ground, depending on the description of it. Low grasses are to be cut down, especially on banks. So if you live on a hillside, you may want to even be a little more aggressive with your distances. The other thing to consider is you may have 10 feet of your house cleared, but if you have low brush around an 80 or a 90 foot tall tree that catches fire, the potential is still there for it to ignite your house.
Do you think as if it falls over?
Every tree that stands one day will fall.
That's
Fire
true.
can speed that up.
Wow, interesting stuff. You know, it's funny because, you know, I'm a realtor, so I sell homes and I go out check out a lot of homes on a daily basis. And there's something that I always think about is people like to plant these pine trees right close to to the property, the structure itself, and they grow, and at times they grow through the eaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked. I'm like, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah, so where we live in, it's an urban forest, and it's a balance of people and trees, and we can't use any one science. It's an evolving science. So there are ways to make things like that work if people want it. It's just the amount of care and attention. Are you going to be there to take care of it? Because obviously, the closer you are to nature and living with it, the more care it's going to take in an urban environment.
Obviously. So, I mean, I can potentially see the hazard on pine trees, which I think they're pretty, I mean, they get dry pretty easily on one side. I know this. I don't know why. Maybe because they're too close.
Well, so they're evergreens. I mean, in evergreens, they'll always have green leaves, but they'll continually shed throughout a year too. So those interior needles that are no longer useful for the photosynthetic process or feeding the tree, the tree's going to shed those. It's going to use the outer ones to give it the most value, and it's going to shed the interior ones. So anything that's evergreen is going to shed throughout the year as well.
Okay, interesting. So that's a higher potential hazard, it seems like, if it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, the scariest thing right now with the fires and the trees is the trees were already under attack from insects, bugs. I mean, we're predicted to lose about 45% of our tree canopy in Southern California in the next 2 years.
Wow.
Now we throw on wildfires and the additional trees that we're losing there. What canopy are we going to have?
Wow. What canopy? Sure. That's scary, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the environmental values of it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that
We need
houses that
oxygen.
have trees, it's cooler for the cooling in the summer and all those other benefits that we get. So, in a tree on a hot summer day, the shade can be 10 to 20 degrees cooler than out in full sun.
Right. That is true. Good stuff, man. Wow. So, 10 feet, though, that's a recommendation. That's what
Minimum.
the fire marshals
Minimum
will
10
recommend.
feet.
10 feet minimum. So if you guys are watching, make sure you go back home and you take a tape measurement and see if you have at least 10 feet. If not, you can reach out to him. He's going to help you out with that.
Absolutely.
We will share phone numbers. Claire's going to put his phone number, website, how to reach out to them. Seems like he knows some stuff. How long you been doing it?
16 years.
16 years. Yeah, that's some serious stuff.
And real quick on a side note, in my first couple of years, in starting tree care, I was actually in an area that was evacuated for a wildfire. I was living up in the San Bernardino Mountains, so
Yeah.
I know what goes into it, the fears that are involved with it, and it's just there's simple steps we can all take to reduce our risk.
I agree, and that's why we put a title on "Don't be cheap" when you're trying to reserve your investment, your home. When you talk about your home, which is the biggest investment of your lifetime. So going back in the insurance, and let's talk about all this mess that's happening out there in Northern California. So I really hope people have a policy that can cover at least enough to reconstruction. Tell us a little bit about what kind of policy do you recommend for us, people that live here in San Diego, and we actually had a problem with fires?
Right. Yeah, so to kind of tie in with what Ian does, I actually just called him yesterday. We just had a client who bought a home. The inspector went out. He only has a couple feet different, away from the roof. So he's got branches hanging over the roof. They need to be cut back at least to 10 feet. So I call Ian. We bring him in, to make sure that not only are those trees healthy, but they're far enough away from the house so that if there is a fire that comes through, that's not the fuel that burns the house down.
Right.
So kind of tied that in with what he does. And then also, insurance companies always want 100 feet of defensible space. So where there's no dead brush, there can be drought-tolerant plants or green plants in between the house and the canyon, but you want at least 100 feet. That's going to help the fire department protect that house.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Defend that house.
100 feet, though.
100 feet,
Okay.
yeah, which sometimes is not even possible because you live right on the canyon, but still you want as much as possible.
Okay.
As far as the fires going on in Northern California, earlier this year they predicted these are going to be the worst, fires, natural fires
That
in
occurred
history.
I know.
And it's because we got all the rain earlier this year. all the underbrush has grown up, and since we've been through summer, it's all died, so it's all there as fuel. So Ian was saying, fire's a natural thing, so eventually everything's got to burn up, but or be taken out.
That's scary, man. You said that eventually everything's going to burn up. It feels like, whoa.
Yeah, well, we've had some insane fires this year. I was just looking at statistics this morning, and so far in California, we've had 7,980 fires that have been reported just in California this year.
This year?
This
only.
year. Yeah, so we're hearing about 8 huge fires, but we've had 7,000 other fires that have occurred, smaller ones. But so people need to make sure that they're not going cheap. There are.
I agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
biggest asset that you might have. So, what kind of policy would you recommend? I mean, you guys remember what happened in San Marcos? When was it, like 4 or 5 years ago in San Marcos?
That was 3 years ago. It was
3 years ago?
2014. Yeah.
Okay, I remember that. I used to live there. It was scary.
Yeah.
I mean, literally everything was burning, like up in the San Leo area.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Discovery Hills by the Cal State San Marcos into Carlsbad.
Yep.
I mean, that was a mess.
Yeah, I was at the evacuation site. We had one of our vehicles set up on Palomar Airport Road right there in Carlsbad, and just watching the fire just burn down the hill there in San Marcos into Escondido and San Alejo Hills. So the most important thing that I think is to make sure that you follow up with your insurance company. Really, the agent, it's their responsibility to follow up with the client. So every year we call our clients, review. Sometimes they've added on additional square feet or they've updated something. If they can't rebuild the house how it was, they're going to be pretty angry. I can tell you that. So we review every year with our clients to make sure that if a fire like that rolls through, we can rebuild the house exactly how it was.
Do you call your clients and ask information?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. We do a review every year.
Out there, guys, I mean, I have insurance and stuff. I don't think I ever talked to my agent. So, no, it's true. And most of the people that I know that I sold them the house, they probably talked to the agent once when they got the policy, and that's about it. So it's really important, I think, to have a kick-ass agent that can actually call you and ask you questions. Did anything change? Should we do this? Should we add this protection? Should we do that? So you are that guy.
I'm that guy. Yeah.
So if we're referring you to clients out there, you're going to be the one calling them.
Yeah.
No, I care about that. Seriously,
Yeah.
the real talk, it's all about connecting people. It's all about, exchanging ideas, talk about real facts and problematics that we can have, in our lives. So I'm telling you, as a consumer, the insurance agents, majority of insurance agents out there, I don't want to say all of them, but they don't care at all because they just make one call once one's actually is expired or is about to expire, and they're going to renew it. At times, they don't even send you the email, not even a phone call to renew it.
Yeah.
And that pisses me off, man. You know why? Because things change. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, me as an agent, and I have plenty of past clients, I call them at least 4 to 5 times a year, ask them questions. How's your house going? Not because I want to resell the house, but I want to keep in touch with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, we all should do that. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
We call them farmers-friendly reviews.
There you go.
Once a year.
So now, how much does it cost to have a really good insurance on your home?
Depends. I mean, we've got homes that we insure for, I just did one for $286 a year. It's in La Mesa. It's a smaller house, 800 and some square feet, not in a fire zone. We've got homes. I was actually just talking to a gal this morning. She's up in just outside of Anaheim, $10,000 a year. It's a bigger house, obviously.
Okay.
And it's in a high fire zone. So it really depends. I mean, it depends on square footage. There's hundreds of factors.
There's hundreds of factors.
Hundreds that go into it.
What would be the median or average, I should say, that people can expect out there to work with Farmers Insurance? They call you and you give them a policy.
The median price, I think, in San Diego is around $800 to $900.
That's what I thought. I always say $1,000 to my clients.
$1,000's
But
good, yeah.
Okay, good stuff.
But you start to add in auto insurance, it's going to bring it down. Umbrella insurance is going to bring it down. Earthquake will bring it down. So there's a lot of discounts out there. Engineer discount is going to bring it down. So
let's talk about that. Earthquakes. So we're going from fire to earthquakes. So if you have a policy like that, you pay $1,000 a year, $900. You're not covered on earthquakes, correct?
Correct.
What happens if you get a cracked slab and half of the house now
is hanging off a cliff or something?
Exactly.
Yeah. There's no coverage unless you have earthquake insurance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
So now, how much would it cost to add earthquake insurance on the?
Earthquake in San Diego is pretty cheap relative to other parts of the state. So Anaheim, I would say the average earthquake policy is probably somewhere around $1,200 a year. Down here, we do them for $250 to maybe $400 a year.
Per year.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So if you guys don't have earthquake insurance, I strongly recommend to call this guy. We're gonna put all his information on that. Not only have a really good insurance for in case of fire, in case of what else? Let's cover floods and so forth. But I have earthquake insurance for $250, $300. I think I will do it every single day, all day, no problem. That's my thing. Yeah. Every day, all day, no problem.
He also covers when trees fall on houses.
Yes, that's what was the next thing. I'm like, so tell me something about this. Did you ever have, you guys work together, obviously, really well because you take care of the trees, vegetation, sorry, and you insure them. Did it ever happen that a tree fell on a house?
I haven't had a tree fall on a house. I had one fall on an HOA. It was one of those big eucalyptus trees.
That's the country.
It was a big one, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It caused a lot of damage. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage.
Wow. So what do you recommend? Does it ever happen that, you know, HOAs or condominiums call you and come to inspect, give us an idea what we could do or to prevent from, you know, having a serious disaster?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the best ways, really, to safeguard yourself. So large organizations like myself, they'll offer a free consultation once a year. We'll go out, we'll do a full inspection of everything within the potential strike zone. So if it's tall enough to hit the house, we're going to evaluate it. And we'll give you recommendations to reduce that risk. Again, it kind of comes down to every tree that stands one day will fall. But what can we do to reduce the risk of that right now?
Makes sense. Okay. So, I mean, tapping into what I do for a living, which I sell homes, I was telling you previously, it happens a lot that there is dead trees in the backyard. I guess people don't cut it because it's expensive to take out the stumps.
Depends on your definition of expensive.
Right.
Right?
I just can't wrap my head around, like, why would you have a dead tree in the back?
So what I do, being an arborist, I mean, it's not always common knowledge. Now, some people are cheap, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Life is not cheap. Yeah, exactly.
Deferring cost is just that. You're just deferring it for somebody else in a later time. Trees are eventually going to need the work. Now, if you're proactive and you take care of them at a young age and you take care of them throughout their life, it's just like people. They're going to need less care later on when it costs more, right? So if I get fat now and I smoke and I drink, when I get older, it's going to cost a lot more to keep me alive and keep me healthy. If I take care of myself now while I'm younger, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier, a lot more cost effective, right?
That's a good point.
So, and it boggles my mind that whenever somebody buys a house, they always do a home inspection. Nobody ever inspects the yard, right? You just said it yourself, tree work's expensive. So why would we ignore that high cost when buying a home or a property? Why not have that evaluated with the home and see what your costs are in landscaping? I mean, as a buyer, that would give you a ton of leverage in your negotiations of, look, I had a certified arborist, because you always want a certified arborist to do the inspection, not a tree surgeon or a tree guy, but an arborist. You know, and it could be very well be. There may be $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 worth of deferred maintenance in the landscape there that you want to take to that.
Especially in the big ranches, or if you're in ranchos and a fe that you have a couple of acres of land. I mean, that could be really costly.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's also, it's an asset, so every tree has an appraised value. And the value of a property, I mean, some estimates say up to 25% of a home value is the outside landscape in its entirety. Now, trees can appraise upward of $40,000 to $50,000 or more based on species, size, and age. It's a miraculous and a huge asset that we have that very few of us pay attention to.
Interesting. You know, I never thought of that. That's actually a great point. So we do look a lot on the landscape and the hardscape too. You know, look if there's a pool, what kind of patio, if they have pebbles or whatever the situation is, and we give it, you know, an evaluation, of course, depending of the state, if it's in good conditions or whatnot. But I never thought about the trees. Obviously, when it's a nice manicured garden or a manicured backyard, in my opinion, homes that they have a really nice backyard, they have a tendency to sell for more money. And I agree with you. I mean, that's one of the recommendations I give to all my sellers when we get together, we do a consultation. I always recommend them. It's like, you don't want to have dead grass. You don't want to have like just stuff all over or dirt. Make sure you clean it up really nicely. get somebody that's a professional landscaper and take care of it.
Yep.
I agree with you. So, what other tips on top of your head or experiences that you had in the past few years being in this business? Do you do more residential or commercial?
We do both, actually. You know, a lot of the issues that I see with trees on a daily basis just comes to overall health, right? So, one of the basic recommendations we can make on every property out here is to fertilize annually. And people think, especially here in California, well, I don't want to promote growth. My tree grows too fast anyways. Well, fertilization isn't really meant to promote growth. It's a multivitamin. And again, kind of going back to the analogy of people, if you're healthy, you're less likely to get sick. So keep your trees basically healthy. Fertilize them annually. Have them inspected once a year. And, you know, it'll go a long way for you. You will save a ton of money.
So, we're in Southern California, I'm in San Diego. There's a ton of palm trees. And I don't know the names of these palm trees, and they always have these yellow, brownish leaves falling like halfway right there. But there's ton. Seems like nobody takes care of it. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have them in my yard.
Right.
Oh, I did until he came out.
Apparently, it's not easy, right, to trim those trees because, I don't know, because I've seen tons and nobody takes care of those damn trees. And I'm always wondering, I'm like, how come they're ugly?
Yeah, well, some of the worst ones, too, are the Mexican fan palms. So they'll get the full skirts. They have the husk going throughout the trunk
That's
of the
the
tree.
one, yes. That's
Yeah,
what
so
I'm
those
talking
are the
about.
Mexican fan
Yeah.
palms. And, you know, those trees are incredibly dangerous to prune. If they haven't been pruned in over 3 years, there's actually a national standard that doesn't allow us to ascend the tree from the bottom up anymore. We have to go from the top of the skirt down using a single rope technique. The reason being is, and talk about a huge fire hazard, that's a Roman candle that'll light up in the wind.
That's what I'm saying. Like that thing, you will burn like
Yeah.
this.
Oh,
But
yeah.
a lot
So
of
fast.
tree workers are suffocated by those trees because of the weight of those fronds. So that's why that standard
Wow.
changed. You know, 3+ people annually were dying because of suffocation from palm fronds. So, you know, the biggest thing, again, it's deferring that maintenance. It's going to cost a lot more if you don't prune it every year. And palm trees here in San Diego, a minimum, once a year you need to clean them up, get the old stuff off, clean the fruit
Yeah.
seed pods out. You know, in the more urban areas and restaurants, you got to prune them twice a year because they're going to seed and fruit more, and that becomes a slip trip hazard. So that's the reason why you get those cleaned up, aside from staining the concrete and all those other nice things they can do.
Right. Wow. Great tips over there, man. So if you guys have some ugly, what are they called?
Mexican fan palms.
fan palms, feel free to reach out to me. He's going to tell you how to take care of it. That is a hazard, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you have these trees out there, let's say, and you're purchasing a home and you don't do anything about it, and then you need insurance, could that be a risk in order to get your insurance policy?
If you have deferred maintenance, like he was saying, and somebody slips and falls on the berries that they drop, or the palm fronds themselves, somebody trips and hurts themselves, now you're liable.
See?
Got to keep them
That's a
clean.
big thing to think about there. So I know you wrote a couple of notes. And I want to talk about it. So what is exactly you would love to talk about? I want to be nice today.
Well, I just have.
Claire, does that sound good?
You're being so nice.
I've been
Giuseppe.
sitting here. I'm having a good day.
Maybe we should not be nice. No, I just have. I just went to our annual agents conference for farmers, and our CEO was reporting back how much we've paid out in claims just in the last month.
How much
So I
was
just
it?
wrote some of those down. Well, Hurricane Harvey, we paid out over $400 million. Hurricane Irma, over $150 million. Nate was nothing; it was only $30 million. And then the fires so far, we're at about $500 million
$500 million.
right now.
So
Wow.
you worked for State Farm? They're still in business.
Farmers.
Farmers. Oops.
So we're at about 1.2 billion
Wow.
that's been paid out in claims just in the last month.
That's mind blowing. 500. How much for in California?
500 million so
That's a
far,
lot.
and the fires are still going.
Jeez.
So you said talk about real life experiences.
Yes, please.
So last time I was telling Claire before this conversation that I started in 07.
Mm-hmm.
Early 07, we had the fires in October of 07.
I remember that.
We had homes that burned down, and they lost everything. So I got to see very firsthand and very quickly in my career how we handled those claims, and what the process is. So it was crazy to see. I mean, how much it costs. You know, these are homes in Rancho Bernardo, which they don't cost that much. You know, to rebuild, they're $400,000 or $500,000 to rebuild. But when you start to factor in replacing personal property, you know, so replacing everything that's inside the home, loss of use, so putting them up in another house while their house is being rebuilt, you know, those things add up very, very quickly. Then getting the home back up to code costs money as well. You know, there's new building codes that weren't in place in the 70s when that house was built. So
they need fire sprinklers throughout the house.
Right.
They have to run the whole water thing.
Yeah, so whatever the building code is in that area, you have to now abide by that. So that home that cost $400,000 or $500,000 to rebuild now just turned into a $1.2 million claim at least.
Interesting.
So you
That's the new then crude information. I like that. That's the good stuff. So, I mean,
I can tell you this though. When we were, you know, because I went out personally and walked through the, you know, the house that was on the ground with those clients. They never asked, boy, I wish I would have paid $100 less a year for this policy. They're saying, can you get me back to where, you know, where we were before? So at that point, premium doesn't matter. And one of my other notes was there are 120,000 insurance companies in California that can do homeowners insurance. You only know the name of probably 119,990 of them though. So you don't want to go cheap with one of those companies that you've never heard the name of before.
Makes sense.
So we're always concerned about the consumer and the premium and, you know, what do I get from my insurance when I'm trying to rebuild? But how does like Harvey and Irma and the fires in NorCal, how does that affect your bottom line as an insurance company? That has to be a bad day for you, really, right? I mean.
Well, I mean, for the insurance company, yes. We have billions of dollars in reserves, and, you know, there's $1.2 billion that's going to be gone here in a month. Fortunately, insurance companies plan for that. You know, so we had most of them happen just in the last 4 weeks or so. Didn't have a whole lot happening, you know, in March, April, May. So it's all kind of happened right away. But, you know, they plan for that. They plan between 1.1 and 1.3 billion to pay out per year. So we're right in that range.
It's true. If you think about it, I mean, especially in the last few months, and we had so many catastrophic events that it's scary. It's like, what next now?
Yeah.
I mean, if we just missed an earthquake and that's it.
So, but I can say, I can say that every insurance company is raising premiums, more so than they have in the past. Every company. So we get calls.
What percentage
well, I see the percentages. So in California, they can apply for a 6.9% rate increase without the Department of Insurance coming in and asking a bunch of questions and going through, you know, financials. So every company in the last 2 years, and you can do this twice a year, has done that. So you're talking about 6.9, 6.9, 6.9, 6.9. That's 28%. Roughly.
In 1 year.
In 2 years.
In 2 years. I mean,
2 years. So for the last 2 years,
that's a lot.
These events have just gotten bigger. They cost more to fix. People are filing more lawsuits, you know, so they're paying out more in claims. Every company has applied for 6.9% that I've seen.
Though. I mean, like you just mentioned, they paid out $500 million, and it's a lot of money.
You have to bring in a lot of $800 to $900 premiums to make up for that difference.
A lot of $800.
Yeah.
That's some serious stuff. So going back to you on, you obviously treat different trees as well, right?
Yeah, every tree's different. Every, you know, even the same tree in the same yard in different parts of the yard can be totally different. So that's why we want to look at every tree. We want to see it, walk around it, touch it, see what's going on with it.
You know, what's interesting, most of us that live in the metro area and whatnot see the trees just for the beauty of it, but we don't see it as a real living creature. Do you see it as a living creature?
I do. I look at trees and I tell people a lot, you know, trees can be like unruly kids, right? If you don't tell your kids how to behave when they're young, they're going to grow up and do whatever the heck they want. Our trees are the same way. If we give them some structure and some direction at a young age, we make these beautiful, responsible trees for the community later on.
That's so awesome. So what do you mean by giving rules to the trees? What does it entail?
So we call it structural pruning. We want to prune the tree for structure. So, you know, a lot of people in Southern California, give you a great example. They love the stumps that have multiple trunks coming out of it, right? They think it's beautiful. As an arborist, that's a hazard. That's a codominant leader, and we know that those narrow angle of attachments are more likely to split than a single central leader tree. So what we can do at a young age is we can cut off, essentially think of it like a body. And when a tree's young, we're cutting off fingers, which are branches. You cut off a finger, the hand's going to be okay. If you wait till it gets much older, now you're cutting an arm off, or you're cutting the legs off, right? So you're making bigger, more aggressive cuts later on. So it's very important. If you have a tree in the first 10 years, you want to prune it every third year. So 3 times in the first 10 years, and you can develop a really nice structural tree. Now, if that tree is going to grow in that space for 60, 80, 100 plus years, 10 years is a very small span of time in the grand scheme of things. The other thing is just not doing too much at one time. So you got to stage it out. You can't go into the tree that's grown for 30 years, prune it one time, and it be exactly everything you want. You've taken too much out.
Okay, so wow, it's a lot to. I mean, it's interesting. Like you really know your stuff. You know exactly. And it was funny they say that's like an unruly kid. I never heard of that. That's pretty cool, actually. I love in the way you said it, because it makes sense. Me being an ignorant, I have no idea what you're talking about trees, but it does make sense.
Well, you're not ignorant. I mean, that's the average person. I mean, we walk under trees every day. Nobody really thinks about them. So yeah, we use analogies a lot to help make it a real world understanding. Because honestly, when I go out there and I tell the person, no, I can't prune it that way, they want to know why. Right? But there is a science to tree care.
I bet. I mean, so what would you recommend the consumers out there watching? They all have, their own yard, they have some grass. It's the typical California home. Let's say a little grass, a couple of trees here and there, maybe a lemon tree, maybe whatever, an orange. What do I do with this tree? They don't do anything with it. As a matter of fact, as a result, when I go show their homes, there is all kind of dead fruits on the grounds. And the tree looks beat up.
Yeah. A lot of that starts at the time of installation of landscapes. And, we've helped people in the past with developing landscapes. And one of the first things I tell people is when you're budgeting for a landscape, budget for the maintenance that goes in after it. Because there's nothing in the world you invest in that doesn't take maintenance to maintain and keep up and for the value to increase. Your landscape's the same. But having that basic annual inspection, fertilizing, I mean, look at the health. One of the things we say is, don't put a $5 plant in a $1 hole. Put a $1 plant in a $5 hole. Prep your soil. Make that environment that it's going to grow and develop in as conducive as possible for a healthy, happy
That's good
tree.
golden nuggets, huh? I like that.
Didn't you say, too, that people actually over-trim their trees in San Diego?
A lot, and that kind of goes back to that, if your tree's been growing for 30 plus years and in a day it's exactly what you want, it is too much. So we're governed by national standards with tree care, specifically ANSI A300 and Z133.1, and it says that in a given pruning cycle, and a pruning cycle should be, at most every year, but realistically 2 to 3 years, 25% of the live foliage at most comes out. That's the maximum. When you start to take out more than that, the tree's reaction, if you take away too much of its food-making capabilities, is to push out more growth to compensate for it. And we call them water sprouts. So one of the biggest things is tree topping, where, people say the tree's just gotten too tall, so you cut it. Every branch that gets cut gets anywhere from 3 to 7 new sprouts out of each of those cuts. The problem with those sprouts is they grow 5 times faster than the branch that was cut. 5 times faster.
That's crazy.
It's trying to compensate for what it's lost. Now, the problem with that rapid growth rate is it's weakly attached. And if it's weakly attached and now there's exponentially more, the potential for failure and Pete getting a claim because something fell on the house is now much higher. Same thing even with our eucalyptus trees and a thing that we call lion's tailing, where everybody wants to clear out the interior canopy of a tree so that air can move better through the canopy and it's less likely to break. And they do it a lot with the eucalyptus trees, and we hear about branches breaking. And the analogy I tell people is, if you've ever gone fishing, and you know what a fishing pole is, it's got rings throughout the length of the cane.
Yeah.
And if you get a fish, it bends at the tip, right? But it's distributed throughout that length. Now, thinning out that interior, essentially, it'd be like taking all those lower rings off the fishing pole, except for the very last one, and running your line through there. Now, if you get a fish on that, what's it going to do? Snap. It breaks.
Breaks.
Trees do the same thing. So
Crazy
a lot of things are done in Southern California in our tree care that have been done for years and years and years, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best method at this time. You know, and I tell people, the analogy I tell people is, hey, back in the Civil War when you got shot, they cut your limb off. Now we'll pull the bullet out, right? I mean, so things change. Tree care's changed. It's evolved a lot, and in the last 30 plus years, the science has really evolved with tree care.
Got it. So, going back to insurance claims. So, on a home, insurance claims on a home. So, what would you say is the claim that most people get into it? You know, that they actually file it with insurance.
Yeah, what I see, the stats that I've seen most recently is about 89% of homeowners' claims are due to water. So like a pipe bursting.
True,
now we
that's-
have so many hoses, you know, go into everything. We got hoses to refrigerators, dishwashers, washer and dryers. You might even have hoses to other things as well. But when those hoses come loose, you know, you've got water all over the place. So that's
Right.
most claims
So
these days.
floods.
Fire is maybe 4 to 5%.
Got it. So
Because
way less,
much
unless
less.
we have these catastrophic
Right.
events. What about trees? So what is a tree or some trees that you definitely don't recommend to have around your home because it could be a hazard in the future, or because they can snap easily, or because I don't know, there could be a problem.
Any poorly maintained tree. There's really no such thing as a bad tree. There's trees that aren't meant for this area. You know, birch trees are an example. You see a lot of birch trees, and they just aren't meant for here. But, you know, it's really hard for me to say there's a bad tree. Every tree in the right place and the right application can work, and it just comes down to poor maintenance that creates the problems for it later on.
Interesting.
You know, I think the biggest thing that we can do that would help would be to plant a more diverse landscape. So we see a lot of the same repetitive plants in a landscape, especially for borders and screens. If there's ever an insect or a disease that's particular to that one plant, you've lost your entire border,
It
your
migrates
entire
to your
screen,
home. Wow.
and it's all gone. Now you've got nothing to start with. So cultural diversity, you know, replicating nature as much as we can, using native plants and all those great things, that's going to be your best bet. But, you know, there's very few trees I could tell you that you just wouldn't want around your house.
Got it. So I wanted to close up with tell you a little story to both of you and people out there. So I went to show a property last week. Claire, you're going to laugh. So I go to show a property last week in Spring Valley, and it had a beautiful landscape. I mean, I was impressed. That was super cool. So I went back, they have lemongrass, then they have sage, they have rosemary, and then all the little bush was super taken care of. It seemed like it was an Asian garden. So I would go with the clients and go, oh, this is a nice house. Look how cool this landscape. And I like to touch plants. It's my thing, you know, like lemongrass. Like, oh, look. And then we keep on going around, and there was like a little Buddha here, and like some stones, stepping stones go around. All of a sudden, there's 3 gigantic marijuana plants. And I'm like, what?
Growing outside?
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I touch it, I'm like, is this marijuana? And the client behind me is like, yeah, that's weed. I'm like, she's like, so this comes with a house. You got the weed tree too, by the way. So I touch it. I touched the buds. It was so sticky, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, are these people serious? I mean, you have a house on the market. You have this beautiful garden, and you have this gigantic tree. It was crazy, and you know there was an older lady too. It wasn't a youngster. I mean, not the seller, the buyer that I was representing. I didn't know who the seller was, but can you imagine that? So we're talking about diversity, right?
He'll maintain it.
I wanted to close up with it. You talk about diversity. We went from lemongrass to sage to rosemary to weed, all in the same yard.
And the fires are affecting the Northern California farms too, right?
Yeah.
But you don't insure any of those, do you?
No.
No, that's
Just
how I guess
checking.
to know. Well, guys, I wanted to thank you once again for coming over. I think it was a really, really good, you know, stuff that we provided to people out there watching this Facebook Live event. Claire, thank you for everything. We'll thank
Your
your
information is
sponsor.
linked underneath.
The information will be out there as well for each one of you. So we're definitely going to push you both to come and work with us when we have a buyer or seller as far as insurance, tree trims and whatnot. So you can, I really appreciate you. Seems like you know your stuff. Okay? Thank you once again. Thank you for watching Real Talk with Giuseppe. Ciao.